Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Specialist Language Courses webinar for today. My name is Bethan Edwards, and I will be giving the webinar today on high-level grammar for IELTS speaking. Now, a couple of recommendations before we start. Throughout the webinar, I will be asking you questions and asking you to think of examples, and I'd like you to write your ideas using the chat box throughout the webinar. Then at the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions and answers, and in this final part you can use the question and answer section in the floating toolbar. Now, one thing I'd like to remind you is when you answer a question using the chat box, please make sure that you send your ideas and answers to everyone, not only to the panelists. This way you'll be able to share your ideas with everybody listening, and we'll be able to get lots of ideas. So our main focus for high-level grammar today are cleft sentences. So we're going to focus on just one area of grammar, and we're going to give you lots of practice in using this particular structure. So what is a cleft sentence? So a cleft sentence is a sentence formed of two parts, and we use cleft sentences to change the emphasis, to put focus onto new information, or to give contradictory information. So cleft sentences are a great way to improve your score for grammatical range in the IELTS speaking exam. At a band 7, you need to use simple and complex sentences accurately. So let's look at the two different ways. There are two different main ways we can form a cleft sentence. First of all, you have a what clause plus the verb to be, followed by the emphasized information. Now, throughout this presentation, you may see the word clause. What we mean by this is the different parts of a sentence. So a cleft sentence has two clauses or two parts. The second way to form a cleft sentence is using it. So we start with it, then we use the verb to be, followed by that and the information that you want to emphasize. So let's look at some examples. We can have a simple sentence, which is one part. When I get stressed at work, I talk to my friends. So this is the kind of information that you might give perhaps in part 1 or part 2 of the speaking exam. We can change this into a cleft sentence by saying what I do when I get stressed at work is talk to my friends. So we're really emphasizing that second part of the sentence, talk to my friends. Let's look at another example. I get on well with my colleagues, but when I have a problem, I talk to my friends. Now we can change this into a cleft sentence, starting with it. I get on well with my colleagues, to set the scene, but it's my friends that I talk to if I have a problem. Notice in this sentence we're using that to refer to people. You could also use who. So when can you use a cleft sentence in the IELTS speaking exam? You can use cleft sentences to express likes and dislikes, to give reasons, and to give more information about people, places, and things. Now, there is more than one way to give information about people, places, and things. You can use a relative clause, and today we're giving you more variety and more options to be able to express your ideas using complex sentences. So let's move on to some practice. We're going to practice making some sentences with what. So we're going to look at talking about likes and dislikes. So something that comes up a lot in the IELTS exam, part 1 and part 2. We're going to start our sentence with what I really like is. Our topic for today for this sentence is do at the weekends. So let's look at my example sentence. What I really like to do at the weekend is get outside and enjoy the fresh air. Now, I'd like you to write your ideas into the chat box, please. So make a cleft sentence starting with what I really like doing at the weekends is, and finish the sentence. So who's got some ideas to share with us in the chat box? What do you like to do at the weekend? Good. So we've got an example from Jason. What I really like to do at the weekend is meet my friends for drinks. And Juan Cesar, what I really like to do at the weekends is just sleep all day. I'm sure you're not the only one. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Now this time we have less information. So what is? Okay. This time we're going to talk about things that you don't like. So we've got the verb dislike and our topic is summer. So my example, what I dislike about summer is the increase in tourists in my area. It gets very busy and very crowded. So have a think and write your ideas in the chat box. What do you dislike about summer? Okay, great. So we've got a sentence from here from Ruben. What I dislike about the summer is the rise in temperature. And some nice sentence from Mark. What I dislike about the summer is the scorching heat during daytime. Good vocabulary. Jason, what I dislike about the summer is I have to work when my friends enjoy the beach. And Jun Cesar, what I dislike about the summer is the intense heat and sun delivers in our place. Jun Cesar, I'd say intense heat and sun, and the heat from the sun. So not many fans of the sun here. Good. Okay, let's have a look at another example. Now, there is a variation on the what cleft sentence. You can either start with what followed by is, or you can replace what by the thing that is. So here we've got the thing that I just can't stand about is. So can't stand is a synonym for hate. So we're going from like to dislike to even stronger, can't stand. So our topic is either hot or cold weather. So the example that I've chosen here is the thing I can't stand about cold weather is ice on the roads because it's very slippery. So write your ideas in the chat box. What is the thing that you just can't stand about either hot or cold weather? So a good example from Jay here. The thing I can't stand about the cold weather is taking a bath early in the morning. Good point. It's always very cold. Okay, so we've got the first type of cleft sentence using what to express likes and dislikes, and we can replace what with the thing. So we're going to look at some more variations on what. Now, common verbs that you can use with this kind of sentence include adore, love, hate, dislike, can't stand. So all verbs, the kind of verbs that express preference. Okay, so we've seen one variation. You can use the thing instead of what. You can also use cleft sentences to give reasons. So we can say the reason why is. So we're going to look at an example here. The reason why our topic is study English, and what's the reason? Can you write your ideas in the chat box, please? So I'm sure you've all got reasons, good reasons why you're studying English. So from Mark, we've got the reason why I study English is to have a band 7 in all of IELTS. And from Jin Cesar, the reason why I'm studying English is for me to be able to work overseas. Great. So it's another way to say I'm studying English because. So this is a good way to increase your range. And we've got a sentence from Jay. The reason why I study English is because it's the universal language to communicate properly to everyone. Good. Okay. And the example that I had, the reason why I'm studying English is to find out about a new culture. So we can use the reason why to give a reason. We can also use these cleft sentences to talk about people, places, or time. So for example, you can say the person who is. Now this is an interesting one. What can you write here? The person who you admire the most. Let's have a go at writing some sentences. So put your sentence in the chat box. Who is the person you admire most? Okay, great. So we have a sentence here from Ruben. The person who I admire most is my boss because he continues to motivate me to grow as a professional. Geraldine, the person I admire most is my mother because she makes a lot of sacrifices just to send me to school. Great. And the example that I came up with was the person who I admire the most is my paternal grandfather. You've all given reasons, which is great and really important in the speaking exam. Now, the other way we can use a cleft sentence is to talk about places. So we've got an example here, the place where, and we've got visit for peace and quiet. So let's have a look at the example. The place where I go for some peace and quiet is a small wood near my home. And you can also use it to talk about different times. So we have the day when, and then you can follow this by is or was. And the example that we've got is introduce free public transport. So we're going to use this in the future. The day when free public transport is introduced will be a celebration. So notice that we've got a passive is introduced followed by will be. So you can use is in different tenses to express your ideas. We've looked at cleft sentences using what, variations on what, and now we're going to have a look at the other variation we mentioned at the beginning, which is using it in a sentence. So, in order to make a cleft sentence using it, we need to use it followed by the verb to be, that, and the emphasized information. For example, we have a simple sentence, torrential rain is the main cause of flooding. Now, to add emphasis to our sentence, we can change it to it's torrential rain that is, or that's, the main cause of flooding. Now, we're looking at using cleft sentences in speaking, so we can use our abbreviations it's and that's. If you use cleft sentences in writing, which are also common, make sure you don't use the contraction. Let's have a practice. It's. So, this is a common topic for IELTS writing and speaking. So, the problems of living in a city. So we've got it's and problem of living in a city. The example that I've given here, it's the high level of traffic congestion that's the main problem of living in a city. What do you think is the main problem of living in a city? Write your ideas into the chat box. So, who's got some ideas? What do you think is the main problem of living in a city? Okay, so we've got an example from lots of examples coming through. From Ruben, it's the increase in the population. That's the main problem of living in a city. And Geraldine, it's the increasing amount of criminality, so crime. That's the main problem of living in a city. And Jay, the main problem, it's the main problem of living. So we need to make sure the sentence is the right way round. So we have, it's the noise and the pollution that's the main problem of living in a city. And from Viv's, it's the noise of passing vehicles that's the main problem of living in a city. And Jun Cesar, you've got a good example, which is leading on to our next point. So we've got it's the high level of traffic congestion, the that's the main problem of living in a city, then if we come to our next example, we can follow that on with its and who. So here we've got the government. So with the government, you can either use who or which. And to follow on from our idea, we can say it's the government who should address the problem of traffic congestion, or it's the government which should address the problem of traffic congestion in cities. Both are acceptable, and then you can follow on this idea with increasing the standard of living for people living in a city. And so those are our cleft sentences using it. So you've given us some great examples there. So we've had a brief overview of how to use cleft sentences to expand your grammatical range in speaking. It's also applicable to writing as well, but we've looked mainly at speaking today. Now, we also have some recommendations for resources to help with your grammar and speaking. So we have the guided e-learning, the GEL grammar app that you can download for your phone or for your tablet. If you want more practice on using cleft sentences in writing, you can look at the Using English for Academic Purposes website, which is a resource for university level writing. This particular area and link can help you look at cleft sentences. You also have New English File Advanced to continue practicing and find examples of this particular grammar point. And we have our grammar for IELTS and also speaking for IELTS. If you want to invest in some books, there is a speaking for IELTS book which you can use in addition to your course, which gives you ideas on grammar, vocabulary, and ways to answer questions in the speaking exam. So thank you very much for listening, everyone. Any questions, you can write your questions either in the chat box or in the question and answer section at the top, and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay, so we have a question about the slides. The slides will all be, and the presentation will all be posted onto the Specialist Language course YouTube channel, where you can see all of our previous presentations. We hope to upload these new presentations in the next week, so you'll be able to view them on the Specialist Language course YouTube channel. So a question from Fahad, from Ruben. Is it applicable in writing? Yes, you can use cleft sentences in writing to add emphasis. What cleft sentences are more common in speaking, and cleft sentences are more common in academic writing. And another question from Ruben, are those books available in the Philippines? The books should be distributed worldwide. They're international books, but you might want to check with any of your local bookstores, or if it's possible to order them online. And Viv's, so a question about writing rather than speaking from Viv's. If you spell something wrong twice, is it big enough to pull down your band score? Now, the IELTS exam isn't marked according to, it's not as specific as being marked by the number of mistakes that you make. In writing, you need to make sure that your ideas are clear and the examiner is able to understand them. So if you misspell a word and it's difficult to understand what you've written, then that may affect your band score in terms of coherence and cohesion. If you misspell a word more than once, it may show the examiner that you don't know the correct spelling of the word, in which case it would affect your accuracy score for grammatical range and possibly lexical resource. So the answer is it depends on how many times you make the mistake, but it's not a case of if you spell a word wrong a certain number of times, then you will certainly get a lower band score. Overall, you should aim for accuracy all throughout your writing. Okay, so thank you for coming along to our webinar today. As I say, it will be available on the Specialist Language Course YouTube channel soon. And we have one more question from Jun Cesar, which is it okay if you correct yourself in front of the examiner? Yes, it is. So if you realize that you've made a mistake and then you rephrase it and you say it again, that's fine. You're showing the examiner that you know how to say something. And the follow-up question is, will it affect my band score? It would depend on how often you correct yourself. So if you correct yourself consistently throughout the exam, so in parts 1, 2, and 3, it may affect your fluency score. It may show the examiner that you're not able to continue speaking, and it may affect your grammatical range and accuracy score as well, because you may not be able to say things accurately without relying on self-correction. So if you occasionally correct yourself, that's not a problem. It's if you do it consistently throughout the exam that it may bring your score down. Okay, and thank you very much everybody for attending our webinar today, and we will see you again in a couple of weeks with our next webinar.